Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic today? Let's do it. What's the scariest or creepiest thing that's ever happened to you while driving late at night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was dating this woman who was afraid to drive, or for some reason refused to, at least on the highway. I never knew why. I worked the late shift at the time. One day I got home at some crazy hour, somewhere between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. I had taken the following day off because her favorite band was playing in a city 2 hours away. She woke me up at 7 a.m. to wait in line. She had to be first, front and center. Guess who drove? I told her I was planning on getting some rest in the car while she held our spot in line. We got there, and there was no line. Employees weren't even there yet. She's mad at me for trying to get some rest in the car. I go sit with her on the curb. Hours go by, and no one else is in line. The first employee walks by and offers us hot chocolate because it's February in the Midwest. People started lining up behind us in the late afternoon. I'm pissed. I could have slept before this ordeal. We attended the show. It was fun. Drive home, and I ask her to drive. She refused. I drive us home. It was the scariest drive I've ever had. I was so tired and physically exhausted that I was hallucinating. I didn't know where I was at first. In my eyes, the clouds on the horizon were the traffic. It clicked with me when I focused on one particular cloud and thought, that's a big truck, why can't I pass it? After I realized my condition, I again tried to suggest she take over. Refused. I tried to take control over my mental state and focus. Got us home, okay? I drove very cautiously and kept reminding myself of what I was seeing and what my brain was trying to make me think I was seeing. I got home, passed out immediately, and had to work the following day and for the rest of the week. So I wasn't able to catch up on the lack of sleep for a while, and that week was very draining. I resent her for putting me in that situation, and it scares me to death, afraid of having to go through that again. This was about 12 years ago, and we broke up a while after that experience. Driving I-80 late one night through central Pennsylvania, it's slightly shorter to cut through Black Moshannon than to take Phillipsburg or Snowshoe, so we did that. It's a gravel road. I'm driving maybe 35 miles per hour when I see eyes shining in the road, but like in the road. As low as I could be, I couldn't see the animal. Just blinking eyes shine. Looking ahead, there are at least 5 more. Assuming it's not something I should run over, I creep up slowly on it and roll down my window. It's a frickin' whippoorwill, rolling around happily, giving itself a dust bath and singing. There must have been 15 more not giving a single shit about our car passing a few feet by. My husband and I were on an emergency trip out to Mississippi to help my mom into a nursing home. I don't have a license to drive a car, so he had to drive the whole way. About 3 a.m. we get to this stretch of road that is, as far as I could tell, a straight road with inlaid fields on both sides. All well and good. But in the pitch black with no streetlights at 3 a.m., it was super unnerving. I noticed my husband is not acting quite right, like he was breathing differently, and his posture was a little different. Little stuff, but you notice when you're married. I was like, honey, do you need to take a break? And he goes, oh no, I'm fine. Let's just finish this trip, and we can find a hotel. I trusted his judgment, and we made it across and hit the hay at the Days Inn somewhere. The next morning we wake up and are brushing our teeth, and I comment on how creepy that stretch of road was. He gets quiet and goes, I honestly thought I dreamt it. I remember it not feeling real and me feeling like it was a dream. I told him I'd asked him if he needed a break, and he was like, yeah, I remember that too. And I thought I dreamt it. Do me a favor, and I'll return it if the need arises. If I ever tell you I'm fine and don't need a break after driving for 4 hours in pitch darkness again, don't take no for an answer. I was so out of it I didn't realize that I was that gone. So we now have a standing agreement to stop each other well before then, but the idea that he was fully disassociated in that moment and had less than a healthy grasp on reality always makes me shiver. I hate to imagine all the moments that could have gone wrong. Remember, exhausted driving is just as bad as drunk driving. Years ago, I was working in IT in a support role based on nuclear power stations in the UK. Nothing had to do with the plant side of things, just the office and desktop systems and supporting servers. I was based in the Northeast, but I was covering on-call for other stations. Anyway, one night I got a call out to the plant across the country on the opposite coast at Haysham. They lost service, and the servers weren't responding. Balls. So I have to drive across the country to attend the call out, do what I need to do, and head home. Now, my journey back included some very out-of-the-way back roads up over the top of the moors. Desolate, middle of nowhere type shit. At 3 a.m. I'm tired, driving along up on the moors, pitch black with nothing around me. I catch a glimpse of something way off to my right. I wasn't sure what it was, or even if I had actually seen something, but it looked like a flash of light or something. I kept driving when I saw it again, clearer this time. A couple of little glowing lights off to the right are moving about. They kept appearing and disappearing, and they started increasing in number. There were about 8 of them at this point, and I realized they were getting closer. Little greenish glowing lights. It seemed to be floating about, moving slowly toward the road. I was a bit freaked out by now, tired, but head all over the place. Am I about to get abducted and probed or something? The lights seemed to be moving about faster now. As they were moving toward the road, now I had been driving all this time, but the lights had been way off in the distance off to the right. But obviously as I was getting closer, so were they, bobbing and floating and getting brighter. I couldn't floor it, as I was on a twisty back road I didn't know, and I was starting to get seriously freaked out now. I'm genuinely a bit scared. I had no effing clue what was going on. The lights were pretty much on the road in front of me, as close as I could tell. I realized I was unconsciously slowing down and gripping the steering wheel, watching these now very bright green lights dance and float along the edge of the road. It was, as my fear peaked and my imagination was running riot, that it happened. 4 effing sheep ran across the road in front of me. It was my headlights reflecting in their eyes. I felt like an utter bell end, but my relief was huge. I was laughing as I continued my drive, but F me, did that experience seriously freak me out. I live in the middle of nowhere and I used to pick up hitchhikers constantly. Sounds good. On Christmas night, I drove over the mountain back to my girlfriend's house after we spent the day with my family. She lived even further in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking about an hour away from the nearest grocery store. Nice. I'm taking the only road out of this area. It's about 20 miles of nothing but woods, a couple miles of deep on each side of this road. It's just a very rural area we all lived in. I'm 18 years old and speeding along this long straight road at about 80 miles per hour. Very dumb, but I was a reckless kid, just trying to get home before 2 a.m. I suddenly fly past this guy in the dark, just walking down the road, miles away from everything. It was freezing out, and I wanted to end Christmas by doing something good and not letting someone freeze to death on our mountain. I throw on the brakes and back up. I asked the guy if he needed a ride. He was carrying a compound bow. I was thinking a bow at 1:30 a.m. Dude's an effing poacher, but I can't back out now. I tell him to put it in the back of the truck and hop in. He sets his bow in the back and tells me he's parked up ahead a couple miles. The guy gets in and goes dead quiet. I mean, he doesn't speak a word. As I said, I picked up strangers a lot back then, but I never had one of them just sit in silence. I ask him if he hung out with his family for Christmas today, and he just mumbles no, and immediately goes back into silence. At that point, I just wanted the guy out of my truck. I continue driving in silence for a couple of minutes until he tells me to pull over at the turnoff up ahead. I pull off to the side instead of pulling completely in. It's a dead end just to be safe. He just kind of sits there silently for a couple of long, uncomfortable seconds and then gets out. It really felt like he was thinking hard about what to do next. He finally gets out, leaving the door open. I say something along the lines of, "Don't forget your bow." Then I reach across to shut the door as he turns around to grab it. He slowly grabs his bow out of the back, then turns back and just stares at me through the window without moving. I just kind of sat there looking at him and decided to drive off. It was not very eventful, but you had to be there. Something was up with this guy. He was giving off extremely weird vibes. At the pull-off, I dropped him off, and there was just a minivan parked with the door open. That struck me as odd too. I haven't picked up a hitchhiker since. Like, it's super cool that you're good like that picking up hitchhikers, but there's a definite inherent danger to that type of behavior, and I don't blame you for not picking up hitchhikers anymore. I don't know. I guess different areas breed different types of people, but that's a dangerous game. My sister was practicing driving around 9 p.m. or so at night. We stopped at the gas station before heading back home. Our windows were all the way down since it was summer. From the sidewalk, we heard a raspy voice call out to us. It was a middle-aged woman from the tone, but we couldn't see her. It was so dark out, and there wasn't a street light by her. She kept asking us to drive her to her brother's house. She claimed she got off the bus too early and doesn't know where he lives. We ignored her, but stupidly didn't close our window. We kept praying for these damn cars to stop coming down the street so we could turn. She kept asking for help and said she wasn't a sketchy person. We told her sorry and were finally able to turn. As we drove off, I was like, if we gave her a ride, how would she be able to tell us where her brother lives if she claims she doesn't even know how to get there by foot? We stopped driving with the windows down afterwards. My ex and I went on a date, and I didn't want to go home after because I hated my family so much that I wanted to be away from them as long as possible. We decided to just drive around, talk, and spend time together to make the night last longer. He was the one driving, and neither of us knew where we were going, so we turned onto a dirt road that was a dead end. We parked to try to figure out where we were and where to go to get home because it was getting really late. Suddenly, as soon as we parked, a car pulled up. And I realized that this is just a scenic sort of road with nowhere to go. It just ends at a cliffish area. There was not really a reason to be there late at night, but this car pulled up like it had purpose, not like it was lost as we were. When the car sees us and starts pulling up faster, we realize maybe this is not a friendly person, so we should leave. We head out of there, and the car turns around and follows us. It followed us for several miles before we finally made a series of random turns to lose it. I have no idea who was in the car, why they were there, what they were doing, or why they followed us, but suffice to say, we never went on any random drives to anywhere in the middle of the night after that. It's not as scary in writing as probably doesn't sound like much. My boyfriend moved about 45 minutes away and would always pick me up from home every weekend. It's basically all freeway, going through the city we live in, and also passes right by the metro airport. This is a very long, straight stretch of highway that is normally full of traffic. One night, around 1 a.m., I remember it being very deserted. We're driving right next to the airport runways and terminals, and all of a sudden there's a minivan nearby. Of course, we didn't even really acknowledge it. We're driving on the freeway. They probably just got on. And at some point, we both ended up looking out the passenger window at the exact same time. The minivan was lined up directly parallel to us, and there was a skinny-looking mid-50s man with his head angled directly toward us, with his eyes and mouth both wide open in the most insane and terrifying screaming type of expression I had ever seen. I liked staring into our damn souls and did not take his eyes off us. I honestly couldn't even believe what I was seeing. I don't remember looking for that long, but I was so damn glad my boyfriend saw the same thing as me because it was the most unsettling and confusing thing I've ever seen. The minivan got off immediately after, as far as I remember. I talked about it and how badly it freaked me out for the rest of the drive. Realistically, I know it's nothing that bad, and he didn't do anything to try and harm us, but seriously, what the was that? It makes my heart beat fast just imagining his face. I didn't know a person's eyes could open that wide. I never think about deer. I rarely see deer in my area, but one night a couple of months ago, I was taking some back roads heading home from a friend's place at around 1 a.m. Out of nowhere, the idea popped into my head of a deer suddenly appearing on the road in front of me. How would I react? Would I swerve or slam on the brakes and duck down? It was just a weird little daydream or thought experiment. Not 60 seconds later, I came across a large deer with antlers slowly ambling around in the dark. I had no trouble slowing and stopping in time, thankfully, so I just watched it cross the road and kind of disappear into a field. I drove on for a bit, but since the roads were deserted, I thought I'd go back and try and take a few pictures of it. When I got back there to where it had been, it was gone, but then 2 baby deer came flying across the road and into the field like the other ones had done. Not so much creepy as strange and coincidental, I guess. Driving on I-10 near Winnie, Texas. It's a 2-lane highway. I'm in the left lane and there's a car next to me going about the same speed. I see a car broken down on the side of the road with the flashers on. In the blink of an eye, I see a person standing on the dotted line in the middle of the highway, and then realize the car next to me and I just passed a person wearing black between us at 70 miles per hour. It freaked me out pretty well for a while after that. One winter, I helped run a children's theater camp with a theater company I work with frequently. While the theater I worked for is about 50 minutes from where I live, the camp itself was hosted at a high school around 2 hours away from my town. Since the camp was only for a week, and they desperately needed one more person, I agreed to stick with it. On the second to last day of the program, we were hit with a massive surprise snowstorm. I took off for home going 15 miles per hour max down back roads, Wisconsin, with roads completely covered and probably about 100 feet of visibility. As if that wasn't nerve-wracking enough, I was also extremely low on gas. It was around midnight at that point, and I was still at least an hour's drive from any bigger city. So I told myself I'd have to suck it up and get gas at the first place I came across, which happened to be a tiny general store in the middle of empty fields. The store itself was closed, but the gas pumps were on. So I pulled off and started fueling. I was already on edge and anxious from the horrible weather when out of nowhere this old beat-up truck came speeding into the gas station and pulled up to the pump directly across from mine. Both the large, burly-looking men got out of the truck. One of them started fueling, and the other stood off to the side directly in front of me, trying to talk to me about how I was doing, asking what my name was, where I was driving this kind of weather, etc. Being a 5'2", 130-pound, very non-threatening looking 23-year-old at the time, I was terrified. I was alone, and my car was still pumping, I had no cell service, and I was in the middle of a snowstorm. It was all too perfect for something even worse to happen. I stared at the pump, ignored the man speaking to me, and thought about my future episode of Dateline. As soon as the pump stopped, I clamored to put the pump away, got into the driver's seat, and drove away as quickly as possible, which was still 25 miles per hour, of course, without looking back. I have no idea if those two men intended any harm or if they were just being friendly, but it was creepy as hell, either way in those circumstances. I'm driving late at night on a large highway. At this point, it's about 4 lanes on each side, with a short white cement divider separating the two sides. For some reason, I look to the left and see a car pulled over on the opposite side. As I pass across it, I notice someone running, hunched over, like they were falling or crawling away. They were just past the trunk, going in the opposite direction of the traffic, in the same direction as my side's traffic. Within seconds, someone was behind them and grabbed the running person. They seemed to have grabbed hard because I saw outstretched hands and longish hair as they were pulled back toward the car. It sent the weirdest chill through me, and I still think about it to this day. It was about 30 years ago, and this image is burned into my brain like it was yesterday. I was 17 and was new to driving. It was dark out, and I was going to pick up a friend. However, I'd never been to their house before. I brought a second friend for some company on the drive. The friend's house was in a very rural area. The GPS had us take a road that was more like a path through a field than anything else, but it connected with the road we needed to be on. Toward the end of the road, there was a house with lots of people outside, and a car parked in the road, essentially blocking it. We stopped a ways back from the group of people, and an older man, clearly drunk, came up to the window and asked what we were doing there on that road. We explained that we were just following the GPS and were trying to get somewhere. He said the car should be moved in a minute, and there was a stop sign up ahead on the other side of the barn where we could turn onto the road we needed. In the midst of this, my friend notices 2 guys picking up a girl and shoving her, kicking and screaming into the back seat of the car. My friend, being bold, wanted to know what was going on with that and tried to get out. I told her not to get out of the truck. Then the car pulled off to the side, and we slowly continued down the road to the stop sign. We sat there for a minute to see if we were going to go right or left, and then boom, I got rear-ended by an SUV. I slid the cab window open and yelled, "What the?" A girl pokes her head out and goes, "That's what you get for showing up to my boyfriend's house unannounced." Then a man came up to the driver's window screaming, and I just gunned it, and we drove off. There was no service from then on. At night, we stopped at a newer-looking house with their lights on. It was an older couple, and we explained what happened. They knew where my friend lived and drove there while we followed. I called the police once we got to my friend's house and had service. They came and took my information, then called a few days later to say they went to the road we were on and the house we were near, but no one was there. I'm assuming a bunch of drunk idiots, but it was one of the scariest or oddest situations that happened to me.